Welcome to the Career Change Podcast, where you'll discover the frank and practical advice and resources that are already proven to work in the real world when it comes to changing careers or figuring out what business is right for you when you are a smart but likely also stuck, overwhelmed, or overthinking person in your mid-30s, your 40s, your mid-50s. I'm your host, Rikke Hansen, a career change advisor, entrepreneur, and former corporate HR professional with over 15 years experience of helping thousands of people just like you identify or create careers or businesses that are both meaningful and future-proof. Welcome home. Hey, it's Rikke here. Welcome to episode 42 of the Career Change Podcast. Will you regret changing careers? Now, this particular episode is going to be great for you if you don't feel ready to start that business or to change careers. It's also good for you if you're still waiting for the right time before you start taking action in your dreams. But most importantly, it is for you if you are fearful of making the wrong choice and end up a failure and end up regretting changing careers or starting that business. And because that's how you feel right now, you are likely, as a result, still stuck in a job or a profession you don't enjoy. Am I right? So if that's you, keep listening. Now, if you're a regular listener of the Career Change Podcast, I have a feeling you might check at least two of those boxes and possibly all three. So you definitely want to keep listening to this episode. And here's why. You'll discover that you are likely fearful of doing the very thing that will end up causing you the most regret if you don't do it, and if you don't do it soon. So let that sink in. One of my biggest missions with the work that I do as a career change advisor inside of my business over at thecareerchangepodcast.com and also here on this podcast is to demystify how career change and starting your own business, it really works for professionals over 35. And what I so often find is that aspiring career changers and aspiring entrepreneurs who've never changed careers or who've never started a business before, they're often holding themselves back because they have a lot of unfounded fears and they believe in myths that are impeding their own career transition. So what I want to do for the purposes of this particular podcast episode, let me give you the bigger picture answer right up front when it comes to the question, will I regret changing careers? So you can reframe the incredible opportunity you have ahead of you to change careers or to start that business. Now, my life's work over the last 18 plus years has been helping people just like you change careers or start their own business. And there's been a real commonality with all of those clients, and that was this. Before they changed careers or before they started that business, their biggest fear before was they were so fearful they were going to fail at it, that they were going to regret it if they were to take that action, if they were to change careers, if they were to start that business. But every single one of them that I've spoken to, once they're over on the other side, what regret do they actually have? Now, believe it or not, they do actually have one big regret, but it's not that they failed or that they regretted taking action. Their regret is that they didn't change careers sooner. Their biggest regret is that they didn't start that business sooner. They regret that they waited for so long, that they wasted years, and in many cases, even decades, in a career or job or profession that they didn't enjoy, that sucked life and enjoyment out of their daily life for years. But because they were so afraid of regretting changing careers or regretting or failing at starting a business, they stayed stuck with that job or career they hated because inaction and indecision felt safer. Might you be able to relate to that? So I often hear, when people are over on the other side and they change that career, they started that business, they're really feeling so much more like themselves. They're like, oh, Rikke, why the heck did I not do this sooner? There's almost that feeling of resentment, right? So now you know right up front, the biggest regret of my clients, so career changers over 35, and also of career changes in general, I can tell you that. I've done this for 18 years. I come across thousands and thousands of people. Their biggest regret is that they didn't make the career change sooner. They're literally angry to have wasted so much life and time and energy in a job that in many cases they hated. And that's even more the case now for them because now they've had the experience of creating work they absolutely love, they enjoy, and they've experienced what that does to your self-esteem, to your meaning, to your overall experience of life. Now they know what's possible. So they're even more like, why did I not do this before? So I had more years of my life like this. So I'm telling you all of this because I really want you to learn from them. Don't delay, especially if you also right now are in a career or job or profession that's sucking life out of you, that's not bringing out the best in you, right? And here's the thing, this, I wish I'd done it sooner, regret experience is not just me and my clients' experience. It's also backed up by science and countless studies. And we'll go deeper into some of them in the rest of this episode because I really want to motivate you and help you reframe what the real failure or the real risk is. And here's the one thing that research consistently shows and agrees on, and this only increases after 35. It's the things we didn't do that gives us the most regret and that keep eating away at us rather than the things we did do. Let me say that again. Research consistently shows, and this only increases after the age of 30, 35, it's the things we didn't do that gives us the most regret and that keep eating away at us rather than the things we did do. All right? And this is really the case. The older you get, the more inaction regrets you'll have. That information in itself should cause you to want to listen to the rest of this podcast. It should also give you a clue as to whether you will regret changing careers or not. Like I said earlier, your regret fears are likely topsy-turvy. You might be fearful about doing the very thing that will end up causing you the most regret if you don't do it and if you don't do it soon. You should be a lot more fearful about not doing it, about not changing careers, not starting that business, especially when it's done in an intelligent and meaningful manner. Okay? So here's a quick overview of what we'll cover in this episode. Now, if you are listening to the Career Change podcast, it's likely because you are stuck. So let's first very briefly look at why you are not taking action. What are the classic issues, right? Especially now that you know that you're much more likely to regret what you didn't do, right? So let's get you into action. Let's get you into taking action. We'll also look further at the research into regret and decision-making when it comes to work. You'll meet both an author who started the world's biggest online regret database, and also a former professional poker player who has a quote about your future self that made my heart skip a beat when I first came across that, and I cannot wait sharing that with you. So the first thing we'll talk about is why people don't change sooner, or why people don't change at all, i.e. why you might also still be stuck and what to do about it. And then secondly, we'll talk about how you can replace fear of failure with fear of not even trying. Because remember, the regrets that hurt the most are the regrets of inaction. And then we'll finish by talking about how you can bring your future self into the decision-making process today to minimize regrets in advance. All right? Sounds good? All right, let's go straight in to the first point, which is all about why people don't change sooner or why people don't change at all, i.e. why you're still stuck and what to do about it. Now, obviously, there are a lot of reasons why people don't change or why they don't change sooner and why they're stuck. For this particular episode, I've just chosen some of the most common ones, and each of them are pretty much a podcast series in themselves. So if you want me to go deeper with any of them, then just let me know. If you're a subscriber over at thecareerchangepodcast.com, then just reply to any of my emails and let me know, what do you want me to go deeper with? And that's the case, full stop. So make sure you're subscribed to the newsletter over at thecareerchangepodcast.com. All right? So one of the main reasons why people, they don't change sooner or why they don't change at all is because they don't feel ready, right? I hear this so often, but I don't feel ready. And these are often people who've been wanting to change careers for many, many years, but they still don't feel ready. So when are they ever going to feel ready, right? They sort of keep putting their transition on hold. They keep deferring it rather than actively taking action and getting it done. You know, they sort of never changed careers before or never started a business. And they sort of hope that if they just wait and see, that then hopefully something will change. And someday they hope they'll feel ready. Now, here's what I can tell you. Just like other things that you've never done before in your life, you will never feel ready for the big things in life. You become ready by taking action and by doing the thing. I always say this to my clients, you do the verb to become the noun. I.e., you do the verb to become the noun. You become a career changer by taking career change actions. You become a business owner by taking business owner actions, by starting that business, right? The antidote to not feeling ready is over on the other side. You need exposure. The truth is, and I can tell you this for a fact, I do this for a living, and I've seen so many people go through this process. Feeling ready is not a requirement for changing careers or for starting a business. You do not need to feel ready. Instead, I want you to know this. You become ready by taking action, step by step. You start exploring and you get going. It doesn't have to be a matter of all or nothing. What matters is that you start something. And then inspiration, motivation, engagement, it arises from engaging in the activity. You only begin crossing a bridge by setting your foot on that bridge, right? Thinking does not count. Just think about for a moment, how long have you already wanted to change? For many of you listening, it's probably 3 to 5 years. Do you feel more ready now than you did when you first started thinking about it? Probably not. You probably just feel a lot more tired and a lot more fed up, and you've wasted so much time already. Don't waste any more time. There is only such a thing as knowing that things can get better, and then you commit to making them so. You are enough ready, okay? Here's the thing. Nobody ever feels ready for anything important in life, okay? So that should not hold you back. The second thing that holds a lot of people back from changing sooner or from changing at all is that they keep waiting for that, in quotation marks, right time. Oh, if only world politics or, your life situation or the world in general could just line up perfectly, right? This is especially the case for those of you who are more the perfectionistic, overthinking type, right? If only just things could be perfect and lined up so that you can have like a smooth transition. Wouldn't that be lovely? Whereas meanwhile, you're completely ignoring the fact that TikTok, you were over 35 and now is likely the best time. You're not getting any younger. The world is not getting any less complex or simple. Neither is your life, right? So that's so important to think about. Now is the best time to make the rest of your life the best years of your working life. There is no such thing as a bad time for changing careers per se. It's just that at certain times, when things are not perfect, you might just need to be more flexible with your timelines and your choices. And it might just take a little bit longer. But that shouldn't hold you back from getting cracking, because changing takes time. So you better start now. Like I mentioned several times already, I've done this work for over 18 years, being a career transition advisor for many people. And I have never observed a single client who had such a thing as the perfect time in his or her life. The right time is when you decide it is, when you decide that it is, and when you commit to making it so and you go all in, right? Let me flip it around though. Is now really the right time for you to continue to stay stuck in a career and a job you don't even enjoy? Is right now the time for you to de-skill and, risk even your career you're in right now by going into a job every day that you don't enjoy, that you hate, and just get more and more and more and more fed up and exhausted and maybe even ill? That's not the right time for that neither, is it? You are already in the worst case scenario, so to say, so things can only get better, right? I will likely do a podcast episode about this particular point very soon, all right? So the third reason And actually, very much the very common reason why people don't change sooner or why they never change at all is because they have this deep fear of regretting it. And it's a deep fear of regret that's bound up with this fear of failure. You are deep down so afraid that you're going to be a failure at this business or failure at this career change, right? You're literally focusing 100% on what could go wrong if you take action, if you make that change. Now, notice this, because you might have this problem as well yourself. Most professionals over 35, they focused almost exclusively on what could go wrong if they do take action, as opposed to what could go right if they do take action. So just check yourself here. Are you literally solely focused on that fear of failure, on what could go wrong if you were to change careers or start that business? Or are you equally looking and spending as much time looking at how good could this get? How right could this be? Because if you are literally focusing solely on all of the fears and the failure and what could go wrong, then of course you're going to choose to stay with a career or the job you don't enjoy, even though that's really strange logic, right? So if this is you, think about it. You are choosing, whether consciously or not right now, you are actually choosing inaction, as in not taking action on that change. You're choosing that out of fear. Fear failure, fear regretting it. How is that actually working for you? And what kind of day-to-day life at work right now, and maybe for the many years, has that actually resulted in for you? Do you think you will look back on what you're doing right now, staying stuck in that job and that career? Do you think you'll look back on with regret on that or not? Just spool it out a year, 10 years, 20 years. If you don't take any action, will you look back with regret or with happiness on what you're actually doing right now? You know, that is what you'll regret, not taking that action. Now, a few years ago, the well-known author Dan Pink, he set up a website called the World Regret Survey. What a website name, right? And to his amazement, with just a couple of tweets and a newsletter mention, he ended up very quickly with a database of 15,000 regrets from more than 100 countries around the world. And now, as of today, he has more than 23,000 regrets from people in 109 countries. So he has a lot of data. And here's what he said about this experiment. When you look at career regrets, the big one, the big career regret is not being bold enough and instead playing it safe. Now, you do have some people who say, I tried to go out on my own and start a business and it flopped. And I really wish I hadn't done that. But they are outnumbered significantly. It's not even close, by people who wish they had started that business rather than work for the man. I wish I had pursued the riskier path in my life. I wish I had gone out on my own. That is a huge, huge career regret. Interesting, right? What people they regret so much in their career is not being bold enough. So obviously me being the curious person, and even though I lived in the UK for many years, I was born in Denmark. So I went on and looked, okay, what do the Danish people say about this? And I found a regret there that's classic for my age, for, my client group. And he was a male, age 49. And his regret was spending too long time in a scientific career, right? There was like a classic one. It could be spending too long a time in a banking career, finance career, IT career, whatever. You get it. That one hurts. Right? Does that sound like potentially a familiar regret to you? Spending too long in a career you truly don't enjoy, that doesn't feel like you, right? That type of career regret is what Dan Pink, he calls a boldness regret. Those regrets are about not taking the chance. Those are the regrets about you are at a juncture and you're choosing to play it safe rather than taking a chance. Might you be able to relate to that? Now, the second insight about regrets that Dan Pink had, it was that there was a big demographic difference in terms of age in terms of what people regretted. And this is important because I know, most of my listeners here for the Career Change podcast, you are over 35. So data showed that when people are young, let's say in their 20s and their early 30s, they have roughly equal numbers of regrets of actions in terms of what they did and regrets of inaction, what they didn't do. But as we age, and this is as quickly as your 30s and certainly into when you hit your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, 70s plus, then the inaction regrets, they take over. The inaction regrets totally take over. And inaction regrets are, in general, about twice as prevalent as action regrets. Because as we get older, what really sticks at us and what really eats away at us are the regrets about what we didn't do, right? Even more, regrets of inaction, they are really the most painful because you can't do anything about them. They just keep eating away at us, all right? So how about you? Let's put this over on you because I really want to help you here. I want you to do what's going to make the right thing for you. So what if you knew what if you already knew, because I've kind of told you, right? What if you knew what your biggest career regret would be? I.e., for my clients, it always is that they didn't change careers or didn't start that business sooner. Now that you know that, will you do whatever it takes to avoid having that regret in your life? Especially if you right now are in a career that is not ideal anyway, where you might feel resentful or understimulated or bored or frustrated, right? Wouldn't you want to choose action, taking action, starting that business, changing career, rather than continuing to choose inaction? I've given the choice of looking into the future and seeing whether you regret it or not. Now, what are you going to do? Inaction or action? Now, here's the inaction choice I sadly see a lot of people make due to their fear of failure and regret. They choose to defer their career happiness until some imaginary time in the future when they, like I mentioned before, they hope that they will feel ready or things will be perfect and the transition will be smooth. And what that means is that right now, and maybe for many years to come, you are literally doing the equivalent of putting your work-life enjoyment, your life on hold, or to defer it. Is the work life you have now really the life you want to live over the coming years? I'm really being direct here for a reason. I see so many otherwise smart people who choose by inaction to defer their enjoyment of life at work because they hope that at some stage in the future they'll be able to, or they'll feel ready, or things will be perfect. However, you're likely already 35 or older. And frankly, who knows how long you and I have got left in terms of the time we have to live. Some of us might not even make it to retirement or even to or late 40s or late 50s, late 60s. And one of the things that the pandemic really taught us in the last number of years taught us is about our own mortality. How much longer do you want to wait? Okay. So now you know why people don't change sooner or why they don't change at all. Now you also know why you're still stuck, but most importantly, now you know what you can do about it. It's very, very normal not to feel ready. It's normal to wait for the right time, but they are leading you towards future regret, right? If right now you're totally being led by fear, regret, fear, failure, then you might be choosing inaction. That means you're putting yourself on the path of regret. So, but now you know how to get out of all of these and how to deal with them. You're welcome. All right, let's go into point number 2. What I really want you to do, I want you to replace fear of failure with fear of not even trying. Because remember, regrets of inaction are the ones that hurt the most and for the longest. I really want you to replace fear of failure with fear of not even trying. That's really the antidote to fear of failure. Now, let's put all of this research into practice, what we just learned, and help it, let it help us power, or transition. So remember, research consistently shows that it's these things we didn't do that gives us the most regrets and keep eating away at us, rather than the things we did do. So in short, it's the regrets of inaction, of not doing something, rather than the regrets of action, doing something and regretting it, that causes the most pain to people, especially the older they get. Just think about that for a moment. And then I want to ask you this. Are your career change worries right now focused on fears of action or fears of inaction? Remember, regrets of inaction are the most painful regrets. They keep eating away at you. So if you spend all of your time right now, which you might be doing if you're listening to this episode, then you might be spending all of your time right now worried about failure and worried about regret if you were to change careers or start that business. So what you are actually doing is worrying more about the regret of action than you are of the regret of inaction. Strange logic, right? So let's flip it. You're likely not going to stop worrying overnight. But at least for now, let's use the worrywart tendency, at least to your benefits. So can we agree that if you're going to worry, then flip it? What if you became a lot more afraid of not changing, a lot more afraid of not taking action, a lot more worried about ending up with regret of inaction when it comes to how you spend your work life between now and when you retire? Regrets of inaction hurt the most. So here's the great news. It is not too late to decide what regrets you don't want to have, both in the near future and at the end of your life. So let's normalize replacing fear of failure with fear of not even trying, okay? Now, there's an interesting timeline aspect to regret too. I came across this paper with this really fancy title, The Temporal Pattern to the Experience of Regret. And that's some research done in the 90s, and it's been replicated again and again by Gilovich and Medvec. And it shows that action versus inaction produces more regret in the short term. So sometimes that can be more regret about taking action in the short term. So for example, we might feel regret for saying something embarrassing or agreeing to do an annoying task for someone else. But those experiences of regret, they pass rather quickly, right? So there might be certain regrets in the moment and in the short term that are painful, but they pass really quickly. However, what their findings are is that, and I'm quoting them here, the things we are most likely to regret are the things we didn't do. Regrets of inactions are stronger and persist much longer than regrets of action. So if we feel like we should have taken that trip or should have asked that person out or should have gone to college, or what I would insert here, we should have changed careers, these regrets likely last longer than regrets of having done something we might rather not have done. Things like we shouldn't have come to this party, or we shouldn't have taken this job, shouldn't have gone on a date with this person. So let's build on this. Let's say that worst case scenario. Let's say that you decide to change careers or start that business. Let's say you fail spectacularly. Let's talk about worst case scenario. Well, what you have is a short-term regret, not a long-term regret. And also what you have, let's say if you could, you never really fail, but let's say worst case scenario, let's play into your fear here. You really fail at that career change, fail at that business. Now you have an incredible amount of information about what you don't want and what you're not good at, which you can use to understand even better what kind of career or business you want to change into next. And then you can just remember, this is for people over 35, professional over 35. You already have a skill set. You can just go back and make money with the kind of job or career you're in right now whilst you plan for the next career change, the next business, right? You can just go back to your cash cow whilst you figure out what's next. It's a short-term regret. That's the worst case scenario you're looking at, a short-term regret. Because of course you're going to make this transition in an intelligent manner and not risk it all. That's my philosophy. However, if you never try, if you never make that career change, never start that business, then you will end up in your 60s and your 70s or your 80s or however long you're going to live, and you cannot go back and try. You'll be at the end of your life and you were just going to look back, but what if I'd done that, right? That regret of inaction if you didn't do it, will just keep being painful and you cannot go back and change it, right? So, like I mentioned before, we have no idea how long we have left. It is so dangerous to rely on having more time to change careers or start that business in the future. Do it now. Because what's the worst case scenario? You might have a short-term regret and then you try again and then you try again. But if you don't do it, you will get 10, 20, 30 years into the future and you cannot go back and do it now. Okay? So Daniel Pink, he would concur with this. What's interesting, according to him, he's actually written a whole book about regret. Like what he's saying is that regrets about failing to fulfill hopes and goals and aspirations, they haunt people more than those about failing to fulfill duties and obligations and responsibilities. That's what researchers they find. So you need to go after your dreams. Now, this is really consistent with my own findings as a career change advisor. As you know, in my life's work over the last 18 years, yes, the biggest regret of my clients over 35 has been that regret or inaction, that they didn't make the career change sooner, that they didn't start that business sooner. And that can feel really powerful because now they're over on the other side. They're in that career they created, in that business they created. And now they know what it feels like when you find work that you love, that you enjoy. They know what that does to their self-esteem and what it does to your day-to-day experience of life. So if I were to line them all up right now and talk to you, my dear listener, guess what they would say to you? They would say, don't wait. Don't wait. Do it now. That's what they would tell you. I deeply believe, really deeply, I so believe, and I would hope this for you as well, our biggest fears should not be of failure, but rather our biggest fears should be of not even trying. And I say this as a recovering perfectionist who's intimately familiar with the fear of failure. I promise you, you can grow into this. Grow into deciding to have your biggest fears not being a failure, but having your biggest fear being of not even trying. And here's also something I often tell to my clients. I say to them, isn't the real failure staying stuck in a job that does not make you happy or that doesn't now allow you to explore your full potential? Staying stuck in that job you're in right now, isn't that the real failure? Okay? So point number 2 is to replace fear of failure with fear of not even trying. So let's go into the last point. And this is something that is so powerful and really, I want you to really consider. Changes everything. I want you to bring your future self into the decision-making process today to minimize regrets in advance. I want you to bring your future self into the decision-making process today to minimize regrets in advance. And this is so important, and science backed this up. When we make decisions, we don't just do it from the position of now and looking backwards. We really include our future self. We bring it into the present because it is going to be affected by everything that we do or don't do. So here's why it's important to do that. As humans, we tend to favor our present self at the expense of our future self, right? This is a phenomenon that's called temporal discounting. Temporal discounting. And what it means is that we are willing to take an irrationally large discount to get a reward now instead of waiting for a much bigger reward later. And you've experienced this many times. Classic example of temporal discounting is that when you decide to eat that extra slice of cake or 10 extra slices of cakes, or when you decide to skip a workout session or you stay out late, all of those instances, your future self is going to just have to deal with that, deal with the consequences down the line. Right now you just want those 10 extra slices of pie, or you wanted that double shot of tequila, or you keep, putting off getting into shape. And here's what's important. So we've all been there, right? But here's what's more important to be aware of when it comes to career change decisions or indecisions. The further into the future those consequences that show up, the less attention we pay to them in the present, right? So if you drink too many tequilas, you will feel that the day after. But if you don't change careers very soon, the consequences of that might show up further into the future. for better or for worse. So that's why it's even more important for you to be aware of temporal discounting to do with career change, because you might not be aware of it because you potentially won't feel the massive regrets and consequences straight away. So this is why it's important to bring in temporal discounting when we talk about the regrets you do not want to have at the end of your life or in 10, 20, 30 years' time. So temporal discounting is really all about how we manage and how we are in charge of this continual battle between the present and the future self. So when it comes to avoiding regret in the future, especially of the inaction regrets, experts in this area of what's called decision science, they suggest that we bring our future self into the decision-making process now, today, in the present, to really help us not to ignore or push away the potential consequences of those in-the-moment decisions or indecisions for our future self, right? So what's so important to do when you make these decisions is that you actually anticipate regret up front as part of your decision-making process, because it can save you so much heartache and pain in both the near and far future. So you know that I love bringing in powerful quotes. And one of the most powerful quotes I've ever come across with regards to avoiding regret, but also with regards to how to make great decisions, is actually from a former professional poker player who's now turned decision strategist. She's called Annie Duke, and she wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. And the top title is one of the best subtitles ever. Thinking in Bets, and then the subtitle is Making Smarter Decisions When You Don't Have All of the Facts. And she's very much comparing life to playing poker. And here's the quote. In most of our decisions, we are not betting against another person. Rather, we are betting against all of the future versions of ourselves we are not choosing. That's so powerful. In most of our decisions, we are not betting against another person. Rather, we're betting against all of the future versions of ourselves that we are not choosing. Whoa, just think about that for a moment. That's what's at stake here. One of the ways that Annie suggests that we overcome temporal discounting is this. Before making a decision, we put ourselves in the shoes of a future self and we ask, how will I feel about the decision I'm about to make? Whether it's action or inaction. So in this case, let's say changing careers or starting that business or not. How would I feel about this decision in 10 minutes, in 10 months, or in 10 years? So you are actually zooming out and thinking, what would be the consequences of this action or inaction in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years? Will I regret it? And I would even move it right, so what you're doing is you're moving regret right in front of your decision-making process. I would even push those measures out to saying, how would you feel in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, or at the end of your life? How will you feel if you don't at least give your career change or your business at least a try, right? So the problem is that most people, when they make these decisions, they focus purely on the near consequences, let's say in a year or two. That's not helpful because your fears shouldn't just be driven by the immediate sort of regrets, which are the ones that last the least long anyway, right? So zooming out and thinking much bigger about it and way further into the future in terms of what we regret, that's how you make much more powerful and most importantly, more meaningful decisions about what truly matters in your life over a lifetime. So stop doing this zooming in kind of decision making. Zoom out and look at the bigger picture, right? It's not enough just to do positive future envisioning. You might already have a vision board, right? But that's not enough. It's probably not making you take action. It's great to have that to focus on. But if you really want to take action, and this is definitely something Annie goes on about, is it's just as important to envision what will happen if you don't do it or what you're going to regret. So you also need to envision your negative futures that you want to avoid. That can actually be even more powerful. And this is backed up by research. Think about it. An analogy that's often given is, let's say you want to get fit It can be very nice to have a vision board about, you want to be slim and fit and healthy. But what if you also started thinking about what will happen if you don't become fit, right? The health issues, the physical issues, mental issues, all of that kind of stuff, diseases. Do you see how powerful this can be in order to actually bring your interaction? This is not just about inspiring you, which I'm hoping that I'm also doing, but it's also about making you bloody take action, right? This is so important. When we don't feel ready or when we fear failure, it can be so easy to default to what we consider safe in the short or medium term. And we can forget about what truly matters over a lifetime and what the things are we will truly come to regret, right? So just do a check with yourself here. Are you actually doing this kind of future forecasting, right? For better or for worse? If you're like most aspiring career changer, what you might be doing instead, and which I really want you to change, right now you are likely focused mostly on what you stand to lose in the near future. If, you start that business or change careers, you're likely zooming in rather than out. You might be worried right now, but if I change careers or start that business and I fail, I'm going to be an embarrassment to my peers, my family, my colleagues. I'm going to fail. I'm going to have to go back with my tail between my legs in 2 years after having bombed. Oh, the shame. Is that what you worry about? What if you were to zoom out? Much further out. Who would you rather disappoint? Yourself in the future? Would you rather disappoint your future self in 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time? Is that who you would rather disappoint rather than short-term disappointments of what it might take to change careers, to start that business? This is so important. Instead of letting just your present little self make the decision on their own, ignoring the experiences that your future self will have to deal with, the consequence you have to deal with. You want to turn this one-way, myopic decision-making into something much bigger. You want to have a conversation between your present and your future self and make much more powerful decisions. All right? As I like to tell my clients, what are the possible future versions of yourself that you would most regret letting down with this decision? And again, this is what's so powerful. It is not too late to choose the regrets you don't want to have. That's really how I want you to flip all of this on its head, okay? Right? So, you're listening to this because right now you're wondering if you will regret changing careers. This is a classic overthinking behavior, but it's also really passive and really unhelpful. Why not reframe it and take control and ask yourself, what regrets do you not want your future self to have? What future versions of yourself do you want to connect with right now? And make sure that you start becoming soon, because you want to create that business, you want to create that career, versus having those regrets at the end of your life of not even trying, okay? This is your time. Don't wait any longer. Be very careful. You can choose the regrets you don't want to have, but you got to take action, right? So now you know why people don't change sooner or why they don't change at all, but you know what to do about it, which was point number 1. I also really hope you'll take on board my suggestion to replace fear of failure with fear of not even trying. Because remember, it is the regrets of inaction that will hurt you the most over a lifetime. Let's normalize fear of not even trying, instead of what's sadly the norm for most people, which is being held back by fear of failure. Ask yourself, isn't the real failure continuing to staying stuck in a job that does not make you happy or allows you to explore your full potential? And then number 3, bring your future self into the decision-making process today to minimize regrets in advance. You want to anticipate this temporal discounting issue. Remember, it's not too late to choose the regret you don't want to have. And then let yourself be haunted in a good way by that Annie Duke quote. In most of our decisions, we are not betting against another person. Rather, we are betting against all of the future versions of ourselves that we are not choosing. So my friend, choose wisely. This is about what life you're going to have between now and when you retire. I am sure you're listening to this podcast because you want something much more exciting, much more meaningful, and much more you. So don't delay. Also remember, I'm here to help you on that journey. And how much longer do you really want to wait? How much longer do you want to defer your life, defer your potential? If you want help, I'll see you over at thecareerchangepodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening.